Now, political instability can lead to a destabilisation of Rand water. This is a view by engineer and former Director General of Water Affairs, Professor Mike Muller of the Wits School of Governance. Now, Professor Muller says there is a need for new infrastructure to accommodate the increase in population. Now, let's discuss this further with Professor Mike Muller. Professor, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Prof, do we have a water resource problem or do we have a water management problem?
Good afternoon to you, Katlego, and to your viewers. Well, you know, we have all of those problems. What we've seen this week in Joburg with sort of water shortages is that there are particular problems in local areas where there's perhaps a little problem with infrastructure, problem with maintenance, and you have whole suburbs going without water for a few hot days. And you know, that's very unfortunate, but it can be resolved. But then you also have other issues where the city doesn't get water from Rand Water, which pumps it up, takes it out of the Vaal Dam, pumps it, treats it, pumps it up to Gauteng, to all the cities of Gauteng, and sometimes they run into problems. And what we had also this week was a power failure, not a power cut, but they had a power failure in their system, which put them offline for a couple of hours. And immediately that problem began to ripple through larger parts of Johannesburg and other parts of Gauteng. But then we have to worry always, is there going to be enough water in those dams that Rand Water gets its water from to provide all the people in Gauteng, not just this summer, but next year and the year after? And what are we doing to make sure we have enough water in the system for today, for this year, for next year, and in fact, you know, for next generations? We have to plan very long term. And there's problems at all levels. And this current week's crisis has focused on the local government level. We mustn't forget the bigger problems because they are much harder to fix and they take longer to fix.
Now, speaking of those problems, Prof, I mean, the Vaal Dam is at 92% capacity, and load shedding has now seemingly been one factor that is causing scarcity with regards to water in the city. And we know that with no backup generators that are pumping into the power outages, it has resulted in what it is now.
Well, you see, Rand Water, where there were some problems, has actually got arrangements with Eskom. They shouldn't be switched off due to load shedding because they're an essential service. But it can happen that they have failures in the Eskom system or failures in their switchgear, which can interrupt supply. And we understand that that's what happened this week. They have improved their system, but clearly not improved it enough. But you see, we say that the dam is full. Well, you know, 2 or 3 years ago, it was quite empty. And I don't just worry about the one dam because there's actually about 11 or 12 dams that feed Gauteng, and they were all running down towards 50%. We have to worry about that long term as well as the short term problems of Rand Water. So we should all be worried about whether Rand Water is keeping its electrical systems in place, whether they've got arrangements with Eskom to make sure they don't get load shed, whether they've got alternative lines if one of Eskom's substations runs into problems, and I think they've been addressing that. But that's why I say we have to look at today's problem, next week's problem, next year's problem, and they all involve different people who need to talk to each other and work together quite closely to make sure that we actually have what we need in the cities of Gauteng.
And seemingly, Prof, we haven't been working towards all of these problems. I mean, with city towers built in the 1930s and some of them have not been replaced, development is obviously fast surpassing these aging infrastructures. Will we find ourselves in the same Eskom situation with regards to infrastructure?
Well, you see, I'm not very worried about a tower that's been there for 20 or 30 or even 50 years. In Johannesburg, we've got towers that have been in place for almost 100 years. What we do need to think about is, have we got the infrastructure for the million or so new people who come to Gauteng every 3 years? You know, they require new towers. And of course, you don't want to be building new towers and having to replace the old ones. You need to maintain the old infrastructure. And this is why we have these multiple problems. The short-term ones, when leaks don't get fixed fast enough and we lose water. the medium-term ones where they haven't actually increased the capacity to deal with the increased population in some areas, particularly in west of Joburg, for instance. But then the very long-term one, is there going to be enough water in those dams for us in 5 years' time? Because if we haven't started making sure there's enough water in 5 years' time now, in 5 years there won't be enough. What we can say at the moment is that we're lucky. This has been a very wet 3 years, and we're told that La Nina, the weather system that brings us extra rainfall, it's going to continue this year, so we'll probably still have full dams at the end of the coming year. But we can't count on that. At some point, like Cape Town experienced, we'll have a big drought, and we need to have enough water in storage to be able to use it in that time. And you see, that's the kind of thing that the mayors and the Premier of Gauteng ought to be worried about. They ought to be talking to Rand Water, please make sure you don't trip your supply and cause a water shortage today, but also, what are you doing to make sure we have enough water next year and the years after? And we're not seeing enough of that conversation at the moment.
And I mean, Prof, you spoke earlier on about local government and its responsibility towards such things such as water. What's the impact of coalitions and political instability with regards to making sure that the supply of water, especially in the city of Johannesburg, is uninterrupted?
I think it's a very good question. Part of the problem with coalitions and this instability that we have at the local government level is that it takes time to understand these systems. Usually when I was in government, it would take a new minister about a year to get on top of the problems that he or she had to grapple with. And it's the same in the municipality. Many of the municipalities don't understand that they have to deal with Rand Water. They have to discuss with the national department as well as the provincial government to make sure that they've got these long-term arrangements in place. And if your coalition changes every year, just about as you've got taught the MMC what the issues are, you open the door the next day and there's a new MMC. So we need consistency of management, and we have the basis for that, at least in Johannesburg, because in Joburg we've got a separate organization called Joburg Water, which is run by the municipality, but it's run on a very tight leash. The municipality doesn't like it when they go out and make statements without clearing them with the politicians first. And as a result, they don't tell us enough about what's going on and what the problems are because they don't want to embarrass their political masters. And really, the politician's job should be to support Joburg Water, listen to what they say, make sure they have enough money, by the way, to do what's necessary, because a lot of the money collected for water in Johannesburg doesn't get spent on water, it gets spent on other things. And we need to just make sure that the management and governance of our water at city, province and national level works together, and that we keep people who know about the business in charge of the business, reporting to the politicians. But, a politician can't get up to speed, in a few months every time a politician changes. So we've got to start strengthening the technical management at all those levels, city, province and national.
Now, Prof, we know that the economic impact of load shedding has cost the country billions over the last couple of days in which the lights have been off. What would be the projected implications on the economy when it comes to water shedding?
Look, we're not having water shedding in general, and actually we can't have water shedding like in Eskom, because if Joburg Water turns off supply from one reservoir, it sometimes takes 2 or 3 hours before all the people are actually turned off. So water shedding is not a very good idea. What we need to ensure is that we don't have big shortages of water which require major cuts over a long period of time, because it's very difficult, again, unlike electricity, to make sure that everyone in a suburb or in a city gets water when you have it. If the people in the low-lying areas have been cut off, they'll leave their taps running, they'll fill their baths, and the people in the high areas won't get any. And that means you've got to leave the water on all day just to make sure that everyone gets some. So it's not a good idea to go into water shedding. What we do have to have is better management of who is using the water, how much do they use, where can they save, and all the time thinking about, are we doing enough to keep control of our water so that when we run into a problem, we don't find large areas running out of water. You ask about the economic impact, and certainly if you talk to Cape Town, if they'd have spent R500 million as we advised them, I was on the Planning Commission at the time when we advised them to do certain investments, and they said, no, we don't want to do them yet. We can't spend R500 million in case there's a drought. They reckon they probably lost 3 or 4 billion rands in both the tourist industry in particular, but also in all sorts of other areas of revenue where the city was badly affected. So it can be very expensive if you don't have enough water for the whole region. And that's why we need to plan, not just for today and tomorrow, making sure people use water efficiently, and when there's restrictions, please can they abide by those restrictions, but making sure there's enough in the long term so that we don't have to impose restrictions when there's a drought, because there will be droughts. We know that. At the moment, we're just lucky, and we must thank the good Lord for that, but prepare for the wrath of the heavens when they decide not to provide what we need.
So lastly, Prof, how much trouble are we actually in? Is it too late for us to avert a looming crisis, and what is it that ordinary citizens can do in order to ensure that we don't get to levels of water shedding?
I don't think we're in an immediate crisis, Katlego. I think that, what we've seen is that there are weaknesses in the local management. And the scary thing is when there's weaknesses in local management, you have a new mayor comes in Johannesburg and says, oh, we must all put JoJo tanks in our houses, I believe he said yesterday. And really, you see, that's not going to be enough. A JoJo tank provides enough for 1 month of a household's basic water supply, 6,000 liters. That's what a household uses a month. So if there's going to be a 1-year drought, well, we'll have water for a month. And can he tell us, please, what we must do for the other 11 months? He needs to pay attention, talking to Rand Water, talking to the Minister of Water and Sanitation, and say, what are we going to do to make sure we don't have a city of Cape Town kind of water crisis? And the answer to that is do those long-term investments. So the last message, perhaps, Katlego, is I'm afraid to say that we were supposed to have another dam in Lesotho almost complete by this year. Currently, we haven't even signed the contract for it to be built. And it won't be here until 2028. So my real concern is not this year and next year, because there is water in the dams, but after that, 23, 24, 25, 6, 7, 8. We will have to live with what we've got. And if we have a bad drought during that period, then we will be in crisis. So as a planner, I look to the long term. As a householder in Joburg, I want to have water in my tap. We need to balance those two things out and get them right. And hopefully the administrations are learning some lessons, and we can avoid a crisis. We don't want day zeros in Joburg or Gauteng.
We certainly hope so. Thank you so much for your time.